Welcome back, Rudy's Resurrection followers. This is the start of episode 14, which is going to be the front clip mounting. It's probably going to be similar to the cab mounting episodes where I break it into multiple episodes. So the first thing we'll be starting with is the radiator support mounting. So I'm going to look at what I'm going to take, what it's going to take to get that trim and get that fit, because that's going to be the first step. That's kind of the first piece of the puzzle, if you will, to kind of getting everything squared up and lined up with a front clip, at least in my opinion anyway. So that's where I'm going to start. So that's what we'll be starting with in this episode, the radiator support mounting. Here we go. When I got that later model cab, the 65, 66 cab from the local salvage yard, I got the front radiator support and inner fender wells with it as also. And looking at the radiator support that came off of my truck, this one's in pretty bad shape toward the bottom here. So looking a little bit more closely at the later model one, it still has some issues, but some of this is probably going to get cut out anyway, trimmed out, but the lower part of it is pretty solid. So I'm probably actually going to end up using this later model one because it's in pretty decent shape. So I'm going to start working to get the inner fender wells kind of removed from it. It's got a battery tray in it as well, but I don't think I'm going to be able to use that. But I'm going to get this one kind of cut out and trimmed, and probably use this one. So here's my radiator support kind of mocked up, just sort of sitting on jack stands here on both sides, and surprisingly the opening the original radiator support is pretty darn close to the opening where it needs to be for the Vic. So I think that's going to work pretty well. What I've got to do here is just going to go on the inside. Here's where I cut the frame off. This is where the inner fender wells bolted on the later model cab. So I'm going to obviously have to trim this out so it'll sit back some, as well as kind of work out a little bit of trimming down here at the lower part for those transmission lines. Kind of same deal on the other side. Just kind of trim that out because it's got to sit back some, a good bit, probably it's got a couple, about 2.5 inches to move back. So once I trim that out, that should kind of get me where I need to be. I can kind of trim out to where the original radiator support was, or actually I may leave that because it's almost exactly at the bottom of the frame right here. So I might be able to use that to mount that support. Yeah, it's almost exactly even with the bottom of the frame right there. So I may just be able to extend the plate out from the bottom of the frame once I kind of close up the front, extend the plate out, and just make a little bushing or a little body mount. Probably use one off the Crown Vic just to mount the front radiator support, just like that. And then probably come off the bottom again a little farther back somehow, or off to the side, come down for my bumper bracket. Alright, so I'll do some trimming. So that's where it ended up. Had to trim a little bit more off the front parts of the frame to get it to sit back where it needs to be. But man, it is really close. But I think it's going to be fine. So I had to trim out a little bit here for the transmission cooler lines running down there on that side. On this side I had to trim a little area out for the power steering cooler lines. But other than that, looks like it's going to fit pretty well. I got all the bolt holes pretty much lined up here on the inside. Not sure if you can see down there or not, but it's the front part of it here is right up against the frame where I trimmed it off. But when I cap that part of the frame off, should be fine. I'll just put the cap, weld the cap kind of on the inside of the frame. But yeah, it's pretty much touching on both sides. But the good thing is I didn't have to trim any out of this. But the other good thing is the bottom of the original radiator support, which mounted on the front of the frame of the F100 here with just a bushing with a body mount kind of deal, is almost exactly even with the bottom of my frame, of the Crown Vic frame on both sides. I couldn't have planned that any better, but it's just right at the bottom. So that's probably how I'll end up supporting this, is just bring a little extension off the bottom of the frame. The hole is just to the inside a little bit. Center of the Crown Vic frames here. The radiator support bushing hole is about right there, but that's no problem. I'll just come over and drill probably a new hole, because this hole is kind of rusted out anyway. Drill a new hole to put a bushing right there just to support that, and that'll be great. That'll work well. So that's the radiator support. So I ended up moving the lower radiator mount back 4 inches. So a whole lot more than a lot of other people have kind of moved theirs back. So I don't know if my cab is just sitting on the frame a little bit farther back than other people that have done these builds, but I really had to push mine back. So far, I think the clearance and everything, I don't see any issues. I mean, it's tight, but I don't see any issues here. Even my radiator hose isn't kinking or anything like that, so I don't think I'm going to have to trim that. That should be fine. All that looks fine. It's tight, but I'll just have to be careful when I start it up for the first time. Make sure I don't hear any horrible noises coming from under the hood. But anyway, that's where we are. So on to the next step, which will be kind of capping off those ends of the frame, and then building the supports for the radiator support, and then it'll kind of start going together like a jigsaw puzzle after that. Okay, so just to review kind of where I ended up my frame cut, it's pretty much right at the rear original front core support, where that welded onto the frame, the back part of that set right here. You can also see kind of on the inside here, this was where that captive bolt was, the rear bolt of the lower radiator mount. And then now you can see where I've kind of drilled and put 2 self-tappers farther back behind. Because again, I ended up moving my rear radiator support back about a total of 4 inches. And so again, that's where I cut the frame. Again, kind of just right in front of where this, I think that's maybe the front hole. Yeah, the very front hole of the upper radiator support. So the upper radiator support, I just moved it back 1 hole, kind of like everyone else has done, or at least what I mentioned John did at Dead Animal Garage, moving the upper one back just a bolt hole, so that moves it back 1 inch and 5/8. But again, I moved the lower one back 4 inches. Our radiator is pretty much, again, pretty straight up and down now, where normally they have a bit of a cant where the bottom is sort of kicked out forward. Other side, kind of same deal. It's cut right where the back part of that original core support welds onto the frame. And it kind of goes somewhat through that opening where that captive bolt is. There's my self-tappers back there for my lower radiator mount as well. And again, just move this one back 1. I didn't have to trim my bracket. I think John had to trim his bracket here to clear the ABS pump. But I didn't have to trim mine on either side. I think he had to trim his to clear this AC line here as well, but mine's not interfering. I think maybe just because I moved out a little bit more or whatever. But anyway, that's where I ended up trimming my frame horns. So again, I'm just going to cap off, probably put it on the inside, just cut a piece of, probably use 14 gauge steel to put them just on the inside, tack it in there, and then I'll bring my bracket down off the lower aspect just to kind of support my radiator support, and that should work just fine. And then I'll bring my, I'm not sure where the bumper is going to come off, but I'll deal with that later to build a bracket to support the bumper brackets. Alright, there we are. Moving on to getting that welded up. So I've got the radiator mount or support kind of mocked up here just with jack stands, and I've got it kind of set up to where my body lines seem to be straight. Again, the bottom of this thing is about even with the bottom of the frame, and so I'm going to try to use a couple of these, well actually these two body mounts that I cut off the back of the frame, to kind of cut them down and put them on the side, kind of the side of the frame. And I saved all these body mounts as well. I'm going to weld this kind of on the side of the frame, and then on the back of the radiator support I'm going to use maybe one of these other pieces of scrap or something that I can weld kind of on the back of the radiator support, so it'll kind of come to rest on top of this, and I can just run a bolt through there on both sides, just kind of support the radiator support. So that's what I'm going to be working on, and once I get it all welded in, I'll get some video of that, kind of show you how it turned out. So here's where I am so far. So this is the inside lower portion of the radiator support, and this is the driver's side, passenger side. And so these are just the body mounts that I cut off of the Crown Vic. These are the ones that are kind of back, kind of mid-body on the frame. So I just trimmed these down and then tacked it to this portion of the lower radiator mount where the original bushing was, or the mount was here, because this is all much heavier gauge steel right here. So I've just tacked it on both sides. So as I mentioned before, the bottom of this is exactly equal to the bottom of the frame right here, and so this bushing is going to be just to the outside of where the frame is. So the frame is going to be about right here. So I've got a couple. This is the original front clip radiator support or core support mounting bracket that I cut off the front of the frame. So I've just kind of trimmed this down considerably, and then using one of the original Vic bushings here, this is kind of my plan. So I'm just going to basically bolt this together, and then this is going to weld or be tacked just to the inside, pretty much right here is where that's going to sit, to the outside of the frame. So that's the next step. So this is what it looks like from the inside. I just got it loosely mocked up. I tacked those lower brackets on the frame, and then I just kind of cobbled together some bushing body mounts there, just from all the spare ones I've got from the Crown Vic. So let's take a look at the passenger side there as well. So that's what we got. So I think that's going to work fine. Take a look from the underneath. That's kind of what it looks like from the underside. So we'll go ahead and leave that kind of tacked up in case I need to change it all once I kind of get
the rest of the front clip put together. I may need to modify that or move that, so I'm just going to leave it just kind of tacked for the moment. But you're going to see my body line right now down the fender. Looks pretty straight to me. So there is some adjustability. I can shim, set these, tack that on the frame just a little bit lower, that support. So if I need to shim it at all, I can always raise it. It's kind of hard to lower once you got it already too high. So that's kind of what it looks like. So I didn't have to cut into any of my radiator surround. So it seems like it fits that radiator almost like it's meant to fit. Like Ford kind of designed it that way. But all right, that's kind of where it is. So on with getting the rest of the clip mocked up. So that's going to wrap up this episode where we mounted the radiator support. Really happy with how it turned out. It's super solid. I think it's going to, easily clear everything. I think the front grille is going to now clear everything because it's, the grill is more even with the front of this valance. It's kind of got everything kind of loosely bolted in here. So I've got to get this kind of cleaned up. I got obviously some rust spots in the lower corners of this that I need to get repaired. And then probably do some welds, a few braces on the inner support there because it's a little bit weak at the moment, but I'll kind of strengthen that a little bit before I coat this. I'll probably put some 415 on this. I thought about leaving it kind of just rusty, but I'll probably just go ahead and put a good coat of primer and 415 on it. I think it looks good, behind your grill and everything being kind of dark and black. It really just kind of makes your grill stand out a little bit, although my grill is kind of in rough shape. But anyway, so just going to get that repaired, and then we're going to be on to the next step. I'm not sure what that'll be, but again, just more front clip mounting. So thanks for your comments. Thanks for watching. I hope you picked up a few tips that you might be able to use on your build. And we'll see you next episode.